I hate having to repeat this grim recap of reality, but 100,000 people are dead, 40 million are unemployed. It's a crisis that'll define a generation, all while the president is tweeting about what Joe Scarborough didn't do 20 years ago. We have some problems, and it's at times like this. Luckily, some members of Congress have stepped in to try and be just that. Welcome to the Man of Jackistan. This is the show that is currently pending a much catchier intro line, but where I go into detail about the world, current events, history. Today, this is part 2 of my assessment of the HEROES Act that Congress just passed. If you like understanding the world around you and want a refreshing new angle to view it from, then Jackistan is the place, and I'm your man. That might be something to build on, like catchphrase-wise, but a quick note. I'm still in the development phase of this show, and with each episode, I hope to hone in on more of a format and figure out better editing. If you hear the air conditioner or some cats in the background, just think of that as authenticity. Compared to some other stuff on YouTube, you might not find the production quality top tier. The content I'll be spewing, though, that is top shelf, for sure. And it's rooted in reality. Plus, compared to some of these other videos. There's QAnon and alt-rightoids. They're all going to be sick once my editing skills are as hot as my ideas are. So I just put out an episode dealing with part of this topic here. If you didn't watch it, you should. But as a recap, House Democrats passed the HEROES Act, a $3 trillion piece of legislation that would provide more coronavirus relief to the battered economy and the Americans who comprise it. The sexiest piece of it, the second $1,200 check I touched on in the last episode I put out. I'll say it again and again, though. I'm partial to the idea of automatic stabilizers. In this case, it would be automatic checks for a certain set amount sent out at a certain set interval, like monthly, until the economy shows signs of recovery. It's expensive, but there is a cost to not acting in a situation like this. Recessions eventually become self-perpetuating. In 2008, it was a confusing subprime mortgage collapse that ultimately led to millions of people out of work in entirely unrelated industries. Right now, stay-at-home orders and fear of the virus might cause businesses to close and jobs to vanish, but eventually, as people have less and less money to spend, it causes secondary and tertiary economic damage. And any money helps. Of course, if you're getting a $1,200 check, you could probably use a $1,200 check. If you don't need it immediately, then it's safe to say that that money won't go unnoticed. Someone with $10 million wouldn't think twice about $1,200, but if you make $60K a year, sure, you might not be a paycheck away from the street necessarily, but you won't not notice that money. If you make even less, it's probably even more of a help. The thing about sending out one-time checks during a recession, though, if nothing else, it lacks a crucial psychological benefit that might come from repeated automatic stimulus money. Rather than getting $1,200 once, and then maybe $1,200 in 2 more months, but you can't count on it, imagine knowing that you'll get at least, say, $600 a month, at least until things start to look up. People are less likely, in that case, to save the money. And in a consumer-based economy like ours, we want people to spend money. And people would like to spend it as well. If you make $35,000 a year and have a kid, and you get $1,200 once, you might save it though, because you might need it. Not for you, for your kid. But if you knew you had $600 cash coming at the beginning of the month and the beginning of next month until the economy starts to get better, you'd spend it on school supplies for the kid, maybe car repairs, an air conditioner that's not as loud, something for yourself, whatever it might be. Then, as the economy improves, everyone gets notified that the next check would be the final automatic check. It keeps people afloat, employed, unemployed, and mentally, it maintains confidence in the economy. It's security, safety, stability. That isn't in this, though. Sorry, there's one-time $1,200 check for everybody, again. And the HEROES Act actually proposes to also extend the enhanced unemployment benefits through the start of the next year. As of now, unemployed people in every state can receive $600 a week on top of whatever money their state gives for UI. This, of course, is controversial because you have a lot of lower income workers now earning more money staying at home than they were making at a job. Really, though, if you get rid of that enhanced benefit, that leaves recent job losses with sometimes as little as 20 or 30% of their previous income. It varies by state. And if you didn't make that much money to begin with, then that's a recipe for some hardship, to put it mildly. The logic here is kind of counterintuitive in some ways, so I get it. I get the criticism, but I'm tired of people on the right saying that this money is, making people not work, that people quit their jobs at McDonald's so they can make 3 times as much money doing nothing, and that's not true at all. You can't just go quit your job and then get unemployment benefits. If your store closes due to, public health experts' advice during a pandemic, then you are eligible for unemployment. If a business has to lay you off, then you're eligible. Sure, the extra money might disincentivize the job search for some people whose employers are permanently closed, but maybe that's okay, for a little while. It'd take so much more time and effort to parse through who gets what and where if we had a more specific way to dole out money in this case. And while a new coronavirus rips across the country, having taken its 100,000th life this week, maybe it's okay if an immunocompromised mother doesn't have to choose to risk her life for $12 an hour until we get the situation under control. Of course, much of the country's leadership is refusing to do anything or even trying to get it under control, but that's a separate issue, and I get it. We can't just reimburse everyone for, binging Netflix forever. Still, it's just painfully transparent why Republicans are itching to reopen. They know business will be slow. But hey, if the doors of a store are open, then the workers can't receive government unemployment benefits anymore. This is cheap as shit and short-sighted. If a business reopens but it gets no business, then its employees will be right back on the unemployment rolls soon enough. Although maybe by then, the enhanced UI will have expired and Republicans will be less stingy dishing out 30% of their previous wages instead of 30% plus $600 a week. You could also think of the additional $600 as almost like government benefits in advance, kind of. Stimulus for low-wage workers that's forward-looking. Here's what I mean by that. Say you make $400 a week at your job, and you live on $400 a week, pre-pandemic. Then this shit hits. Your state might pay poor UI. Let's say you get just shy of 50%. You get $180 a week from the state, plus the extra $600 a week, which puts you at $780 each week. You pay your bills, and after that, you're left with $380 more than you would have had at the end of a week pre-pandemic. Okay. You spend $100, $150 of it on something, anything, whatever. You save the rest. Maybe your retail job is at risk, and you'll be back on UI in 6 months after you go back to work. Things are just tough in general if you're a low-wage worker. Comfortably wealthy people try to give advice to guys making $10, $15 an hour about budgeting, and you do it then. Seriously, if it's so easy, you live on $400 a week. Any takers? No? Okay, then shut up. Maybe for once, this is a break for the little guys. $600 is the average weekly wage in America. So that means people on UI right now are making at least just above the average wage under normal circumstances. Seeing as we've given the rich tax cut after tax cut, maybe we can just chalk the extra 600 up to belated tax cuts for the people who actually work. Although in this case, they're not working for right now. An additional benefit of this enhanced UI, even in states that have reopened, like Georgia, people are still going out less and they're spending less of their money, which, of course, hurts the economy. It hurts people's livelihoods in the aggregate, so maybe to offset the decreased need or want for most Americans to consume at their normal income level, we can give lower earning people some cash, more than they normally make, expecting them to spend it. Whether it goes towards necessities, takeout food, shoes, doesn't matter. They're spending it, right? Injecting an additional wad of cash into the bottom bracket's hands is a surefire way to stimulate the economy by stimulating spending. I think any economist not on the take can safely say that demand-side econ is a better method of, boosting the economy, a better economic model. Giving rich folks an extra $600 a week really won't make a dent in most of their pockets and their Swiss bank pockets and all that. But if you're making less than $600 a week normally, then an extra $600 is huge. And if it's recurring, a large chunk of it will be spent, which is what we want. Maybe you feel weird about giving poor people money they didn't work for or whatever, but maybe you have some moral quarrel with that for whatever reason, but you can sleep tonight knowing that doing this is likely offsetting a slump in consumer demand that's caused by the pandemic. And so it's at the very least mitigating a tailspin in the recession, or a worsening one. Lastly, it might be helpful to think of the extra 600 as a way to reduce the cost of the pandemic from a health standpoint. Every case and every death is a tragedy, of course. I'm not trying to minimize that, but on top of that, it also carries a cost, a big one. If this extra 600 really does discourage some number of people from going out to look for a new job right away, and from going out and working, then that's, X number of people fewer out interacting with their community, which means less, chances for the virus to transmit between people. And most likely the lower income people are the ones who work at jobs with more face-to-face interaction. So, they're, less incentivized to go looking for a job. If $600 a week is a pay cut for you, then it's different. You might be more eager to go look for a job. And I think everyone wants to get back to work. But if someone's at home rather than out getting the virus and spreading it and maybe dying and killing other people, that's ultimately money saved by society as a whole, on top of, human life. So paying a certain number of people to basically not get sick could end up being a cheaper solution than forcing everybody back out all at once, only to get the virus. I could see Congress negotiating a really watered-down version to phase this out, because right now, at the end of July, incomes will drop dramatically all at once when the extra 600 dries up. Extending the full enhanced UI through January, as the HEROES Act intends to do, it'll probably not end up going into force, but maybe they can do something where the enhanced UI is, 500 extra in August, 400 in September, an extra 300 in October, phase it out. I don't think they should waste time trying to fine-tune the amount they give people, so that, the exact amount you receive is more specific to you and what you were making, because really that takes time and resources to coordinate. and then it delays the time it takes for unemployed people to receive their money. Part of the reason why they just put $600 as what everyone gets is because then they can just see, okay, unemployed here, rather than all this calculation and different reimbursement and everything. But all of this has happened. It's happening fast. If we're going to keep the country afloat, we need money to change hands quickly. The extra 600, though, it really pisses off Republicans, even though they voted unanimously in the Senate and the House to pass this. But I understand fundamentally why conservatives would shy away from paying poor people more not to work, and that viewpoint I understand. But to oppose this next item, that just means you're cheap and ungrateful. And not all Republicans are this hypocritical. It was actually from Mitt Romney who I first heard this idea that he called, patriot pay. Maybe that wasn't the first place I heard it. Either way, the Utah senator has gotten on board with this idea of paying essential workers some amount of extra money for simply doing their job during this pandemic. And the HEROES Act includes this, except it's referred to as heroes pay. Basically the same thing, though. Essential frontline workers would get $5,000 or $10,000 in a lump sum of what's essentially hazard pay, and it applies retroactively back to January 27th, 2020. And then, after that, heroes get $13 an hour bonus of hazard or hero pay going forward, and it tops out at $5,000 or $10,000, or until 60 days after the pandemic ends, whatever that's supposed to mean. Anyone making less than $200,000 a year would be eligible for $10,000. The cap is $5,000 if you make more than that. So who counts as an essential worker or a hero legally in this case? Doctors, nurses, lab workers, home health aides, of course. But beyond that, it ranges from, infectious disease researchers all the way to janitors. It might just be janitors of certain facilities. Maybe not, though. It also encompasses, mailmen, but also grocery store workers. So a whole range of people in the labor market are eligible for this bonus. The scope of this is a major part of the bill that was pleasantly surprising to me, because it covers a wider range of workers, than I had expected. In general, it's really bothered me that unemployed people have been making more than a cashier at Wegmans during this pandemic. Not that they shouldn't get the money they're getting, but it also angers me that we've been sending people that are vital to society functioning, just out into dangerous environments for insultingly low wages. Rewarding American workers who've kept our country going amidst a crisis, that really should be a no-brainer. And as a way to compensate for the expanded UI benefits bestowed upon those out of work, this is a way to address this gulf, and it's a hugely important pillar of the HEROES Act. To self-promote myself for a second, my last episode looks longer term and explores the abstract of this, an approach for essential workers who aren't treated as such, to be treated as such. This was episode number 3, actually. It's about essential workers. Anyway, I've thought that they could do this also in a way where they just grant essential workers tax-exempt status on their incomes for a year, or 2 years, whatever. It's another way to reward them, but the problem with that is that the money's not really immediate. A tax return 10 months from now won't really help you now, and it won't help the economy now. Maybe we end up doing that on top of everything else, though. I'm definitely in favor of that. A big quarrel I have with this piece of the bill is that apparently employers have to apply for this hero pay. The bill allots $200 billion for it, which it sounds like a lot, but really it isn't, especially considering how many people it could cover. And my fear is that we run into the same issues that arose with the PPP loans. It de facto benefits the well-connected people in society and the people already fairly well off. And for various reasons, it squeezes out, women and minorities unduly in this case. If any employer can apply, then some businesses that seem, less than deserving might make it to their slice of that $200 billion first, before a small business with 5 janitors who clean nursing homes can get to it or something. I'm not just saying this as like some whiny, PC, liberal, white guilt bullshit here. I don't do all that. But that's a serious concern of certain segments of the population getting left out. The reality is that there were problems with the PPP loans and disproportionately benefiting some businesses, some people with solid connections to banks. Ostensibly, a hero fund with this format might end up giving all the pay to people who could afford lawyers for their, companies to begin with, and big businesses and things like that. So it's a concern that would have to be addressed. And also thinking about it, because if the $200 billion ran out, theoretically they could always add more to it, but adding more money after $200 billion disappears, after a $3 trillion bill, after a $2 trillion bill, that might be a tough fight in the future. If this piece even passes in the first place. The Democrats can make the Republicans who resist this look really bad for not wanting to give money to heroes. So maybe they'd budge, but I wouldn't bet on Mitch McConnell doing the right thing here. Again and again, I keep coming back to this idea that the onus is really on progressives to do the doing that needs done in order to affect change in society. Conservatives often just block. They're on the defensive. They're conserving. And so it goes with this whole vote by mail dilemma. Even though there's no evidence showing that Democrats benefit or Republicans are hurt by mail-in voting, Trump has taken up the issue mostly to sow the seeds of doubt about the election outcomes for if he loses, which is looking increasingly likely. The Republicans who've bent over backwards to get behind Trump on this, they're all saying that allowing more voting to take place this way would make it ripe for fraud. Although a lot of states have done this kind of thing for a lot of years with good results. They're just parroting the president just because of some reason. In the HEROES Act, Democrats have sought to put aside $3.6 billion for election security measures, whatever that might entail. With that kind of money, surely they could figure out some kind of airtight way to do this. Also, this would undoubtedly require the United States Postal Service, which is a federal agency, to assist in the task. Private package carrying and delivery companies, they couldn't get their hands on the ballots. That'd be wrong, and there would be a higher risk for fraud in that instance, I would imagine. But the problem is the post office will actually run out of money very soon. And Republicans don't care about this, because remember, democracy doesn't bode well for them. The calculation here isn't actually that mail-in voting is always bad for Republicans, but in this instance, it's that Republican voters are less afraid of the virus, so they're more willing to venture out to the voting booth and risk infections to vote red. Meanwhile, Democratic voters understand the risk of infection and trust science in general. Also, Democrats are frequently from, higher density areas. People in cities with bad outbreaks may be less willing to venture out publicly to wait in the crowded line and vote versus someone in a rural area with, barely any infections. It's a pretty cynical calculation. More and more Republicans have to find ways to circumvent democracy in order to stay power. To stay in power with an increasingly smaller base, there's going to be a lot of tension in the coming years as a smaller group of people tries to hold on to their dominance, and that's a whole other issue. But think about it. In 2016, Trump won, yet he still insists that 5 million illegal votes were cast in California, which, by the way, is more than the number of votes Trump got entirely in that state. He thinks anything that threatens his victory is some kind of conspiratorial deep state attempt to steal power, and or at least he'll project that suspicion to his base. This year will already be an insane one just because of the election, the coronavirus, and the economic turmoil. They're more preventable than Trump being insane, more preventable than Trump being an incompetent spray tan inhabiting the Oval Office. But there's still likely to be big issues here. A final note on this HEROES Act. I like a lot of it. A lot of it is just rehashing things from the preceding CARES Act, but it's by no means a liberal wish list like, Republicans are charging. All of the items that are on it are perfectly viable. I was surprised that they didn't try to go bigger on this one, but at the same time, I respect that. Immediate results are important right now. Big structural change, when we've gotten past the hump of this thing, will also be important. But the $3 trillion price tag on this makes a lot of people recoil, especially after just spending a couple trillion on a relief package like last month. Republicans, they can spin the hell out of this and say it costs too much, because, that is a lot of money. But what's the cost of not doing anything and allowing a recession to spiral out of control? There's too often a really basic assessment of economics from the right. It's no deeper than the transactions that, gave me my money and where I give my money to. That's not the breadth of how economics works. Nowhere near it. It has a lot of dimensions, multifaceted, complex, and the cost of a runaway recession with double-digit unemployment already, that's a lot. And it isn't just, dollar figures and numbers either. It's the human experience, something we can't totally quantify. But we don't need to subjugate our population to misery just because the best available solutions sound expensive. I mean, what the hell is that? For now, some kind of compromise like the HEROES Act will be necessary. Come November, we have to clean out the gutters, propel Democrats to victory nationwide. It isn't as one-dimensional as, Dems good, Republicans bad. But honestly, if I have to boil things down here, this is kind of the most basic way we can even begin to think about having the kind of change we need. We need the trifecta here on the national scale. We need Democrats in the House, Democrats in the Senate, and a Democrat in the Oval Office. Then we can implement changes of Rooseveltian proportions, something that's really long overdue. Even with the Republicans' rigged game, it's we the people, in order to form a more perfect union and all of that, can rise up to the occasion. It's imperative that we as individuals remain hopeful and vigilant. We have to. Giving up, getting cynical, quitting, and growing bitter along the way, that's kind of just what they want you to do, if there ever was a, they. So stay vigilant, retain hope, keep searching, stay safe, stay free, and use your freedom to stay safe, keep searching, and remain vigilant. And actually be the hero that America and the world needs, and that you can be.